500,000 gig working Instacart drivers are at risk of losing their jobs in the near future. That's what we're going to be talking about in today's video. What's happening, guys? You guys have tuned into Rules for Rebels. Got an interesting story for you guys today. It looks like Instacart, the food delivery service that became hugely popular during the beer cough, it appears they're reaching out to robotics firms and robotics warehouse firms. And what they're looking to do is build a robotic-driven warehouse that they can store food in, and robots will go pick the food for orders. And I imagine they'll still need Instacart drivers to take the food from the warehouse to their customers' homes, because I doubt a robot's going to be packing the car and hopping in the car and driving to somebody's home and walking the food up to the doorstep. So yeah, there still will be a place for some Instacart drivers. I've never driven Instacart, but I would imagine that an Instacart driver's time, I would imagine 75+% of it is spent doing the actual shopping, and probably 25% or less of their time is spent actually delivering the food. So if Instacart were to create a robotics warehouse and the food was already picked and packed and all the driver had to do was come pick it up, I would imagine rather than needing 500,000 drivers, I would imagine maybe they need 100,000, 200,000. So there probably are a lot of Instacart drivers whose jobs are at risk. Now, I thought this story was interesting for anybody who likes like business news and stuff like that. From a number of perspectives, I thought that this article was interesting. So one of the biggest ones, Instacart right now, it is kind of a partner with grocery stores. They add to a grocery store's bottom line. Somebody's ordering food from Target or Jewel Osco or Whole Foods or whatever else. Instacart is actually adding to those businesses' bottom lines. But if Instacart goes this route, rather than being a partner of Whole Foods, Instacart is going to wind up being a direct competitor to Whole Foods, Target, Walmart, and a lot of other grocery stores. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Also, right now, there's a lot of talk about a $15 minimum wage. There's a lot of talk about classifying gig workers as employees, and I know my man Jay Capola just sent me an article the other day, and I had heard about this as well, that in the UK, they recently ruled that Uber drivers are employees. One of the things that was shocking to me about this article, I was surprised to hear that there are 500,000 Instacart drivers. And I was kind of curious, how that compares to Uber. So I just did a quick search. It looks like there's 3.9 million Uber drivers. So obviously Uber has more drivers. Uber has more people using it. But I was still shocked to hear that Instacart had 500,000 drivers. One thing that's kind of crazy, unemployment is already quite high. And people who are driving for Uber and Instacart probably aren't filing for unemployment. But they're also probably not making a ton of money, and they don't have a whole lot of job security. So it's pretty scary if you think about what Uber, 3.9 million, Instacart, 500,000, let's say just for rough numbers, that puts us at 4.5 million. I'm guessing Lyft has a couple million more drivers. And when you think about the number of people who are working in the gig economy for peanuts and who are kind of skewing the unemployment numbers, because a lot of these people probably should or could be filing for unemployment, that's kind of crazy and kind of scary to think about. Before we get into this article, a couple other things I wanted to kind of mention and touch on. In terms of classifying gig workers as employees, technology always outpaces government laws and regulations, whether we're talking about crypto or cybercrime or anything else. And I think that's the case of, gig work and gig workers. I don't think gig workers are employees, right? Like, think about like Uber, Lyft, Instacart. These people, they have no dress code. They can decide when to show up to work or when not to show up to work. They can decide to work for 30 minutes or decide to work for 30 hours. The ball is entirely in their court. And there's really not any mainstream jobs that are like that. Imagine if you went to your dentist appointment tomorrow and they're like, sorry, John, you know what? I know you had a cleaning today, but our hygienist, Mandy, she didn't show up. She just, she shows up willy-nilly whenever she feels like it. They wouldn't be able to run the business with workers like that. And, Uber does work because of the sheer number of people they have. I would say it's probably fair to say that Uber drivers, Lyft drivers, Instacart drivers are not employees, but I think we also probably need to treat and pay these gig working drivers better than we do. And I think the current system, or how we classify them, which bucket we drop them into, it doesn't really fit into freelancers, and it also doesn't really fit into full-time workers. And so one of the arguments that I think Uber was making when this discussion was going on in California is we need a new way to classify gig workers, because gig workers don't really fit neatly into either one of these boxes. And then lastly, the $15 minimum wage and the classifying drivers as employees, I don't think that this necessarily is causing this to happen completely. I think a lot of the robotics and AI and automation is inevitable. It's going to happen one day. But I do think that, classifying these rideshare or gig work drivers as employees is definitely going to speed up the process and cause these companies to kind of make this shift a lot faster. And I think Instacart is much more likely to roll out an automated robot-driven warehouse long before Uber is able to roll out robotic cars that drive people and get rid of their drivers. There's more kind of public safety things at issue. It's a more complicated situation getting robotic cars to run around driving Uber than it is to get robots going around a warehouse packing green peppers, red peppers, and yellow peppers. But let's get into today's article. This article comes to us from Zero Hedge. It's titled 500,000 Jobs at Risk as Instacart Mulls a Robot-Driven Warehouse. For the more than 500,000 Instacart gig workers fulfilling grocery orders at supermarket chains such as Giant, Food Lion, Costco, among others, the delivery service is exploring ways it can eliminate human workers by employing robots at warehouses, according to a new report via the Financial Times. Anyone who's strapped on a mask, or now maybe 2 or 3, and has shopped at a major grocery store chain this year have noticed the many of whom young millennials running around the stores in green Instacart shirts fulfilling orders. While this innovative delivery service has been nothing but stellar during the virus pandemic, the San Francisco-based startup has been researching ways to automate the picking process. Last spring, Instacart sent out proposal requests to at least 5 companies that offer robotic systems and would pick goods from purpose-built dark warehouses instead of store shelves, FT said. Sources said Instacart had initially expressed a desire to open as many as 50 robot-driven warehouses across the U.S. in about a year. No deal has been struck with the robotics makers to fulfill Instacart's automation plans. This comes as Walmart and Amazon are entrenched in an e-commerce delivery war, where networks of robotic micro-fulfilled centers are being developed around the country. The source said there's a lack of interest from grocery store players who have caught wind of Instacart's plans. Britton Ladd, a supply chain consultant, said Instacart's ultimate goal is to become an online grocery retailer and leverage micro-fulfillment centers to fulfill their orders. Instacart told FT that human workers would continue to play an important role at the company. While we have no updates to share, we're constantly evaluating our services in deep partnership with the nearly 600 retailers we work with. Instacart's entire product and model is predicated on being a chief ally to our retail partners. And that's one of these big changes, right? Like if Instacart does this, they're no longer an ally to these grocery stores. They're a direct competitor. Let's see. We're committed to supporting our brick and mortar partners and continuing to invest in and explore new tools and technologies that support the needs of their customers and further enable their businesses to grow and scale over the long term. What's troubling is that more than 500,000 people work for Instacart. If a future rollout of Instacart automation is seen, this will undoubtedly result in higher technological unemployment. And it looks like that's the end of this story. One other thing that I was kind of thinking about, I've kind of followed the gig economy closely over the past years, and I've even, years ago had kind of been part of the gig economy. I tried Uber for a brief time. I used to sell on Fiverr. I wouldn't necessarily consider Thumbtack gig economy, but I have used some of these apps and things like that in the past. And one thing I've noticed just from following this is you get people who are kind of stuck in the past. At one point, in the early days, I think it was possible to earn a living and make a decent living driving for Uber. And a lot of people quit their full-time jobs, bought cars, kind of invested and kind of modeled their life around being an Uber driver. And for a period of time, that seemed to work, and they could actually make a decent living. And I don't know how true this is, but there's even people reportedly making, 6 figures driving for Uber. But that's no longer the situation, right? The fares have gotten lower. Uber has continued to take a larger cut. It's just not I don't know if I want to say it's not possible to earn a living. It's probably not smart to try to earn a full-time living driving for Uber. And I think with a lot of these gig economy jobs, they're not really intended to provide somebody a full-time living. When I was in college, there were times I had to pawn my video game system. I had to pawn a necklace at one point. I've pawned guitars in the past. If I could, within 5 or 10 minutes, sign up for Uber or Lyft or Instacart and deliver groceries for a couple hours to get the gas money I needed to drive home for a holiday or something like that, I would have absolutely done that. So I think Uber, Lyft, Instacart, I think these businesses are kind of awesome in the fact that if you're in a financial crunch and you need money quickly, getting a full-time job, working the 2 or 3 weeks that you need to work to get your first paycheck isn't really feasible. So the idea you can turn on one of these apps and immediately start working and, pay rent that you're going to have trouble making, get a gift for somebody, dig yourself out of some financial hole. I think it's cool for that. I had one buddy who, leading up to his wedding, drove for Uber for a while to get some extra money to pay for the wedding. I think to fill these gaps, I think gig work is kind of good, but the idea that somebody's going to try to build their life around a gig economy job and earn a full-time living, it just doesn't seem very smart to do. And I think there's kind of a lot of legacy Uber drivers who were there during the early days and just, they keep whining and whining and whining about paying everything else, but it's really not going to change. And you're kind of banging your head into a wall, continuing to do a job that's just going to continue to go downhill more and more. And, for anybody out there who's driving Instacart and where Instacart plays a big part of their life and a big part of their income, think about it. Uber wants to get rid of human drivers. They want to have automated, robot cars driving people around. Instacart, if you are an Instacart driver, they want to get rid of you and have a robot running around a warehouse picking food. Like I said, there probably will still be some Instacart jobs because, at least in the short term, somebody is going to have to drive the food from the warehouse to the customer's home. But I guarantee you they're not going to need the full 500,000 workers that they need right now. And eventually their plans probably will be to have robotic Uber cars or their own robotic cars delivering food to people's homes. So, if you're somebody who's built your life around Instacart, Uber, Lyft, start developing skill sets, start finding another way to make money because these companies are actively trying to get rid of you. That's all I got for today's video. Let me know your guys' thoughts on this story. If you guys enjoyed today's video, give it a thumbs up. If you're not subscribed to the channel, click that subscribe button below, and we'll catch you guys on the next video.